Take it away.
I tried to do it on Instagram, but it said something was going wrong, so I have no clue how to get that fixed.
See,
But
the thing is,
however,
what I
like,
think it might be for Instagram actually is because we're in orientation mode. I mean, portrait mode. I mean, landscape. God, I got that wrong twice. Because we're in landscape mode and Instagram doesn't have landscape format, I think that's why. I
that
know before we didn't have the
yeah,
private key connected, but now I think that might be the reason why.
that actually would make sense.
Yeah.
That would make sense. I just gotta change something real quick. Take these out. There we go.
You down for
Oh,
some hell diving after this? A couple
uh,
hours later.
yeah, possibly. I may watch the game a little bit.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the game. Forgot about the
Yeah,
game.
but yeah, let's get started.
All right, take it away.
So, good evening, to all of our listeners for tonight's episode. I'm going to get right into it, starting with the domestic news, looking at the government shutdown that is looming within 5 days, as we were talking about yesterday.
Yeah.
So, just providing additional background for new individuals who are joining us today. The U.S. government is on the brink of a shutdown as funding deadlines approach, with negotiations stalled over healthcare provisions tied to the ACA, also known as the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. Democrats are insisting on extending enhanced subsidies set to expire, which benefit over 20 million Americans, while Republicans and the White House view these as unnecessary spending items. So this echoes past shutdowns and how they've went, like in the 2018 and 2019 shutdown under Trump, which lasted over 35 days and furloughed about 800,000 workers. So the
Yeah,
current,
that's crazy to think
yeah,
about being a government worker in that time because like you're going to get paid eventually, but imagine being someone who's paycheck to paycheck.
right,
Like what do
yeah,
you do? What do you file for unemployment? I think you can, but at the same time it's kind of the government paying the government worker for not working instead of the government paying a government worker for working. It's just I think that this is just a very good show tale behind how fiscally irresponsible Congress is.
oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, um, these current tensions have risen and escalated after a White House memo from the OMB, the Office of Budget and Management and Budget, hinted at permanent layoffs for federal workers and the non-essential roles if a shutdown occurs. So realistically, he's basically so Trump's administration, this the OMB office is basically saying like if this shutdown happens, those that are furloughed would basically be have their jobs permanently laid off, basically. But there was also a ruling, judicial ruling, that all of the federal workers that would actually let go due to the Dodge cuts were actually should be reinstated. Was what the
Yeah.
ruling was. So it's going to be interesting how those two kind of impact, depending upon if they can actually reach an agreement by September 30th.
Which, given how they're pushing back on votes with Epstein, I
Yeah,
don't think they're going to get it in.
and it actually, if I'm not mistaken, the as an huge update, a victory update for those for the truth, the Epstein files petition to discharge all of the files. That would be the House discharging all of the Epstein related files actually passed the House. So
Has it
now we're
officially
just
passed?
yeah, officially passed the House. Yeah, I believe I sent that to you on Twitter when I was on my way home. But yeah, it officially passed the House. So now these files are going to be released after the White House and Speaker Johnson collectively have been trying to push this vote down and not have on the record Republicans and Democrats on what whether they're for it or against it. Because basically, once you're against it, and that vote record is out for the public, those individuals will be coming under some flack and heat when they go to their town halls and things of that nature. So that Epstein file debacle is kind of what has led us to this, shutdown in a way because of them postponing votes due to this discharge petition. But now with it being released, it's going to be some interesting documents that are coming out in the next few days and weeks and months, actually.
I do want to correct you just because the tweet you sent me, they said that
What
they
they say?
had the votes, but they haven't voted on it yet. Two reasons why. The latest New Mexico Congress member,
Yeah,
Congresswoman, it'll take her a few days to get sworn in. And two, they are trying to block it by not having the votes on the 29th and 30th, which is around when she should be fully sworn in. So they do have the votes. They've introduced it with the votes, but they need to wait for her to get sworn in to officially pass it through the House. So I just want to make sure our listeners have the full correct information. Even we
yeah,
make
jumping the
mistakes
gun there.
sometimes. Yeah, but the big news is they have the votes. So that means
Yeah,
either A, somebody's going to have to abandon ship on the Republican side, which wouldn't be Massey or Marjorie Taylor Greene. So it'd be Lauren Boebert or Nancy Mace would have to jump ship if they want to prevent this from being released. And yeah, I hope they don't, but a part of me can really, really see Nancy Mace just being like, oh, never mind. I don't think it's appropriate for this to be released. We need privacy about this, XYZ. But I hope that she does maintain that level of commitment to justice on this matter because this is something that really has been plaguing the country for nearly a decade now, since Trump's first presidency, actually. So that's what? Yeah, nearly a decade,
yeah,
actually,
nearly a
more than
decade.
around 8 years,
I mean,
9 years.
if they don't solve it by 27, it'll basically will be.
Yeah, yeah. If they don't solve it by 2026, they're not going to have a choice anyway. Because even with just Massey, you get 2, 3 more Democrats in there, you're going to get the vote through. And
Oh
I
yeah,
think
without a
I
doubt.
think if those, I'll admit, those few Republicans signing on to it, I think they are playing the smart game. When, of course, it's the ethical choice to do, but politics isn't about ethics. It's about what helps you cover your own ass and cover your constituents' needs. They And I think that some of these Republicans, the specifically Boebert, Mace, and such, Mace is running for governor. I think this
Yeah.
is a way of her trying to stand out amongst the Republicans as someone who's for law and order. And I think the woman is a bit loony, truth be told. But I think in
Yeah, she
regards to
definitely
this,
is.
it's always nice to take whatever help you can get.
No, yeah, without a doubt. And, with those individuals who are standing up for this, discharge petition are going to be on the right side of history once, it is officially passed and all the information is out there. And, conservatives and Democrats can finally understand just the level of how entrenched, the high elite were with Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and sex trafficking domestically and abroad as well. Um, and then continuing on with the shutdown, Democrats are really not budging because they want to have some of these health care provisions protected.
Yeah.
Those provisions that would be removed come 2026 when the Big Beautiful Bill would remove a lot of those healthcare protections for a lot of individuals within America, and a lot of them actually in conservative suburbs, as well as me and Muhammad reported earlier within the earlier episodes of our the beginning of our podcast, actually. Um, with the Republicans, they're just saying it's kind of like a blame game, somehow trying to blame the Democrats for this shutdown, even though they, control all three branches of
Yeah.
government, basically.
And I want to
Yeah.
add to what you just said there. I saw a very interesting poll, and it was basically we talked about it on over Twitter the other day. Which I just want to say, I think it's funny everyone still calls it Twitter, not X.
Yeah.
But the poll was, if the government were to shut down, who would you blame more?
Oh,
And
yeah. Yeah.
it was like 36% of people would blame Democrats, 34% would blame Trump, 30% would blame the Republicans. So you see 36 would blame Democrats. You think, how? You know what I mean? They don't even control anything. But the fact is that 66% of the country would blame the Republicans, whether it's the president or the Republican congressman. That 66% includes Republicans. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's an if you get anything with 66%, going one way in this country, that's an issue you take and run with. I do think that despite the Republicans' best efforts to make this put blame on the Democrats. I think that a majority of people see it's either Trump or their fault that it's
Yeah.
not getting through.
Yeah, without a doubt. And something that's also interesting that I was reading on X, actually, someone was saying that it's interesting to note how when Obama was in his lame duck errors, basically, that the Republicans were able to get a lot of stuff. I'm sorry, when Obama had all three branches, that the Republicans were actually able to get certain things stopped and so forth, and kind of how Schumer, Pelosi, and Hakeem Jeffries are actually kind of just like letting things go, just putting up theatrical fights, not an actual
Oh, dude, the theatrics are
policy or
so annoying.
procedural, type of fight, which was an interesting dynamic between the two, like looking at what the Democrats did when Republicans were fully in charge, looking at what Republicans did when Democrats were fully on charge. Republicans were mostly always on the offensive on a lot of measures that Democrats were doing. But overall, this shutdown itself would disrupt a lot of services. Obviously, individuals know from previous shutdowns that have happened. The 2019 shutdown cost about $11 billion. So, with strong quarter two GDP growth at about 3.8%, prolonged um, shut down longer than the 35-day one would slow that economic momentum. And even the political fallout on both sides of the aisle um, would be something tangible for the voters to see how they're looking to blame each other on, the shutdown itself, and especially the intimidation from the Trump administration about these permanent reductions and mass firings and layoffs. Like, just that whole part of it, if all those individuals are just laid off, unemployment will be skyrocketing. And now that makes it kind of um, a threat on the Democrats. Like, if you don't come to the table, then you're basically allowing all of these firings is a way that the Republicans can kind of sway it and that sway the messaging in their way.
Yeah, and I also want to add that a few some people may not know this, but the largest employer in all of America is the federal government because the federal
Yeah.
government extends to the military, and we got a fairly large army and Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, the whole Space Force even nowadays. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't forget the Space Force, but if the government shuts down, what's expected of you as a government worker, which includes the army, the military, I should say, to encompass all branches, is that you will work and then you will get paid when the government isn't shut down anymore. So I can tell you that it's not really a surprise to say that a lot more of the military people are generally more conservative cultured. You know what I mean? And that's something that is actually a big issue when it comes to the Republicans discussing about how mail-in ballots are an issue. They always want to make make a clear exception, except for the soldiers who are deployed on bases outside the country, or XYZ, or they're on deployment for whatever reasons. They want to make an exception for those people. So it's clear that they value the military voter base. And a lot of people nowadays, people are joining the military largely just for that financial change. Change your life by joining the military. Literally, it works like that. But point being is that this is definitely going to affect the people that they don't want it to affect the most. By that I mean that the government's already in a position where the economy is looking tight and tough.
Yeah.
We've got stocks overvalued. Jerome Powell has come out and said stocks are overvalued. That's pretty a big deal for the Federal Reserve Chair to say that.
Hmm.
We've got him cutting rates because we're going through stagflation. The economy is stagnating, and generally when the economy stagnates, the dollar goes up in value because there's less money going around. The dollar is more valuable to hold. It's in one versus when the money's flowing, a lot more people are willing
Yep.
to invest. A lot more people are willing to throw money. The government's willing to print more money to kind of keep that going, and XYZ reasons. But what we're seeing now is the kind of worst of both worlds: stagflation, stagnancy, and inflation. So what we're going to really be dealing with is a lot of people will, especially if this government does shut down, if the government does shut down, I should say, that people are going to, even if it's 1-2%, they're going to swing the other way away from the right. Maybe not even independents, but I do expect some conservatives who are fed up with this Trump era kind of economics to go the other way if it's just like a moderate Democrat on the other side.
Yeah, definitely across. I mean, definitely a moderate Democrat is going to be that, that winning individual. I feel like when it comes to the grander 2026 race and, the bigger 2028 presidential election, that's going to be, to win on the Democratic side, that's what they're going to need, realistically, and especially when you look at the level of moving to the next thing, like the Supreme Court and legal battles that have now been prominent in the last few months. So the Trump administration is aggressively pursuing cases that expand executive powers, like how we were talking on Tuesday about the executor ruling, basically that 90-year-old precedent now being removed, with Trump being able to fire independent heads of independent federal agencies. So some of these other precedents, bad precedents that
Real
have
bad.
been set by these new laws include challenging to presidential immunity, deportation policies, and as I was saying, agency regulations and firings. So this is building on Trump's first term, where over 200 judges were appointed. The strategy leverages a conservative Supreme Court majority to submit long-term changes. So post the 2024 election, Trump nominated, obviously we all know, Pam Bondi as the Attorney General who oversees DOJ prosecutions and court handlings on everything from border security to FBI reforms. And some of those key cases that have started to come into light. Former FBI Director James Comey is facing potential indictment in Virginia for alleged perjury during his 2016 and 2017 congressional testimony on Russia probes. So the sources indicate AG Pam Bondi and prosecutors have reservations about this indictment, citing the level of weak evidence and political motivations. So Trump has pushed for this level of retaliation against calling, James Comey a part of that deep state system that he so loves to talk about. But just having the AG have those level of reservations and having the president wanting for her to force and continue to push on is dangerous treading waters,
Yeah.
realistic. Because what if this is another incident that happens again, and he actually ends up firing her and putting in someone else who would just abide by whatever Trump will say and not actually what her job says. That's when
Yeah.
dangerous elements can really start to take place in the rule of law.
That's saying something. Someone worse than Pam Bondi. Like I don't even want to
Yeah,
imagine who it
yeah,
could
I
be.
couldn't tell you who really could be a more worse individual, but I mean, Pam Bondi is at least holding up to her job to a degree, and at least I can give her credit for you know having citing like this is weak evidence and politically motivated, compared to probably someone else who, more of a Trump loyalist, would actually just go ahead and, put together some, fake dockets or things, of that measure. And,
Yeah.
news outlets are reporting the indictment is expected soon and possibly on, false statements. A U.S. attorney was replaced after refusing similar charges against others, raising concerns of these high levels of politicalization that we have seen from the Trump administration. So, Bondi is worried about the strength of this case, and a grand jury outcome may be uncertain realistically when you look at everything in the evidence as well. Because I'm pretty sure he was tried on this a while in 2016, I believe. I forget. There was an indictment on
Comey.
James Comey, or I forget who the individual was for lying when everyone was talking about the whole Russiagate nonsense back then. I believe a few, obviously, a
Wasn't
few individuals did get some jail time. Who was
the
it?
thing is what I mean, I feel like Trump in all his I guess glory would be the egotistical glory, I guess would be actually the best way to say it. He loves the whole idea of taking someone to court and then, just winning in court. And it works with the Supreme Court at the very least, but every other layer of court, it hasn't worked for him much at all. going back to the New York court where he was charged with officially charged guilty. Well, and that's why he's a felon of giving campaign funds to Stormy Daniels to shut her up,
Yeah.
which all things considered, Trump's intent to just get rid of political opponents through through the Department of Justice and through using the courts to his advantage if possible. It still blows my mind that some people view him as a good character. Like, you don't have to view the guy as, like, you don't have to agree or disagree with the politics, but if somebody who was a married man was found guilty of giving away your money to make a porn star be quiet, I think twice about voting for that person.
Oh yeah.
It just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make. This is what I don't. I won't get too far off topic. I'll get right back to the court cases and such. But the ability for people to hate one side that's much more than Trump's depravity blows my mind. It just goes to
Yeah.
show how much the right and the left have done good jobs at making people hate the other side. But with that said, I think that's a big fueling point for a lot of this deep state trying to get rid of people he doesn't like. I think when Trump was really touting draining the swamp was the motto back in the first run. Damn, I think a lot of people just really wanted to see him get rid of the deep state. And the thing is, he's essentially become the deep state. He is the
Yeah.
deep state, works with Israel to implement policies that restrict our speeches, all the meanwhile peddling our taxpayer dollars to wars in Ukraine and the Middle East again.
Yeah.
And I think
Constantly.
that this is just him trying to maintain. I don't know. It could be him being personally very petty. It honestly very well could be. Trump's a very petty person. He's like
Which
a
is
real
what I think
housewife of
so. I think
Atlanta.
it's just a petty case that he just wants to go after James Comey, to be
Yeah, I'm like,
honest.
it's either him
Like,
being petty or it's him just trying to fulfill a campaign promise so people still like him. You know what I
I feel
mean?
like if your AG is saying, it's a weak case, there's no reason to go. There's no reason to continue to go after it unless you have a vendetta against this individual. So I
And he
mean,
absolutely does.
yeah, he absolutely does. From obviously the RussiaGate, whole situation, he feels like he has a right to go after James Comey in these this level of indictments. We'll see what it actually is and what's laid out, and we will be reporting that as well. So it's going to be interesting to really see what that is, and also how Pam Bondi is going to relay those level of charges as well, because she's going to have to be the one that speaks to them, even though she thinks this is a level of weak case. And I'm also going to be wondering what those questions are going to be looking like after that press conference.
Yeah. No, I'm
Yep.
excited to see where this all goes. I don't think Comey, James
Comey, yeah.
Comey, them. I don't think he's going to find himself in a position of going to prison.
No, I don't think so either.
But I do think he's probably going to enjoy this 15 minutes of fame. 15 minutes of fame. I'm sure he doesn't care about that. But
No.
15 minutes of being able to rag on Trump, I'm sure he cares about.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And I think I saw something too that Trump was saying that President Obama will be getting charges on
With treason.
treason. Yeah, I saw that. I said, dude, you literally had your Supreme Court pass the law that now will not allow him to get charged with treason. So I don't understand what level you're trying to grapple with that you can get him on charges of treason. It just doesn't make sense.
I mean, he's not a logical guy. He's very emotional. This is why I keep saying he'd be a fantastic, like, Real Housewife of Atlanta. I really hope Trump makes like a reality show after this. You know what I mean? Like, I think if somebody were to pitch it to him, I think he'd fall for it right away.
So instead of The Apprentice, it can be like The Presidential Apprentice or something like that.
Yeah,
Like,
no, the chief of office or something like that, or like
that's not bad,
the
actually.
king of the country, something like that. That'd be like
Yeah.
another thing I could see him calling it.
King of the House.
Yeah, king. Oh, that's a good one.
That's a good one, right? King of the
Good one.
House.
Yeah.
King of the House.
I can see it. I honestly, if he has no political power nor ability to force his hand against the Republicans, and even if he does have the ability to force his hand against the Republicans, they need to man up. I'd love to see them get pressure put on them by a reality TV show star. I think that'd be a fun timeline to be a part of.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And as you're saying, like needing to be stronger and so forth. That's moving on. That's what the Democrats need to do. Honestly, Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. Unfortunately, that old guard is not living up to the excitements, the ideas, the enthusiasms that the new generation of Democrats have.
Dude, they're all performative. That's
Yeah, they're
all
all
it
performative.
is.
Yeah, they're grappling with the post 2024 identity crisis, often reduced to anti-Trump rhetoric, which opinion pieces argue leave them cooked basically.
Yeah,
For the
that's a good way to
2026
put it.
midterms, I mean, polls show distrust on crime, economy, and immigration, where Republicans hold a proactive edge. And I know earlier we were talking about where Trump landed on those issues, and he had high disapprovals, and immigration was right at being tied. But you got to sometimes take away Trump from the overall conservative legislature, congressional, and or state as well, because it's kind of two phenomenons in itself, the MAGA Trump and separate from the actual conservatives. That's why they're polling so much better on Democrats, even though Trump is polling worse on those issues compared to Republicans, down the ballot.
And I want to add to that. I think it was literally just today, just yesterday, like September 24th. That Schumer was asked about what he thinks of how the Democrats are polling and how they're doing across the country. He was like, "Well, we could be doing better, but people dislike Trump more than they
Right.
dislike us." I'm like, "Dude, that's
Kind
exactly
of
the problem. That's
like what
quite
kind of
literally you're like proud of the problem."
yeah, I just don't understand like that statement in itself, obviously, as you were just saying, states the overall problem with the Democratic Party and the old guard ideology that they have. The
Yeah.
future of the party is undoubtedly right now it's going to be all the rising stars in 2016. 2026, obviously that win, and then you'll have Newsom, AOC, Bernie being an advisor on like those will be your big three helmsmen of the new age of the Democratic Party. I really feel like
Yeah.
you'll have some of those individuals trying to fit themselves in, but voters will eventually turn on them. I believe I can't say exactly who, but I can say like more so the Israel aligning, Democrats or Republicans, things of that nature. They're going to be challenged by this younger generation that's not standing up for those things.
Yeah. I mean, there is a good rumor, not even, I wouldn't even call it a rumor. It was confirmed that AOC is looking for either a president or Senate run.
Yeah,
And given where the national landscape is, she would not win the presidency at
no,
all.
not at all.
She would
No,
absolutely win the Senate
yeah,
against Chuck Schumer.
yeah. Win the Senate, get rid of Chuck Schumer, run for the leadership position. Whoever's gonna be the senior individual there, either you run against them, or you just take it, have him be the leader, and then you just you know usurp him afterwards when he's done his leadership term.
I
But
mean, when is Schumer's term up? Is that in 2028?
I think it is in
I
2028, and
think
the
so too.
Senate,
There's
I
a lot
believe
of
it's
Senate
six.
elections in
It's
2028.
six years for Senate, if I'm not mistaken.
He's been in that seat since 99.
Yeah.
Insane.
Yeah, and some other Democrats are taking a different look on it actually. So Representative Pat Ryan, Democrat of New York, is launching a political action committee to support patriotic Democrats. So he's aiming to reclaim patriotism from Republicans and stir 2026 ambitions. So I've reading some articles. He's looking for individuals with military background service, um, teaching service, and public utility service as well. So those are really great areas to pull from to build up a bench. And I love how he's saying it in patriotic Democrats, because that really is another way to look at patriotism outside of the way that Republicans view it. Being patriotic is being a good union worker, being a good teacher to your students, teaching them the right materials and making sure they're understanding things clearly. And all those levels of jobs are also patriotism in their own way, especially military veterans. That's a top above the top the utmost level of patriotism and a citizen could receive
Yeah,
realistically. So I love that he's doing this. I'm going to be watching to see what candidates that pack supports, and how they do if they're able to eventually win some seats. And I'll also be looking at Andrew Yang's forward campaign as well, and who they're supporting too. Actually, I had the chance to meet him when I worked at the Pennsylvania State House.
it's cool.
Great, yeah, yeah, great individual. When I heard he was there, I was like, oh, I gotta say, I gotta meet him,
Gotta meet Andrew
gotta
Yang.
meet him,
Yeah.
gotta meet him.
They and it's interesting you mentioned that as well because there's the one man running for Senate in Maine to DC, Susan Collins, somehow a Republican in a blue state for Senate, which blows my mind. They especially considering what she votes for. They
And how old she is, honestly.
Yeah, Graham Plattner. He's a former, I
Yeah,
think, former Marine, I believe, but he is in the military. He was a former military member. So I do think, yeah, people like that. You want to see people who care about the country, who want the country to do well, but they just they don't agree with what the Republicans say about it. Like going back to the era of, Romney, Obama, McCain, Obama. Like, yes, I disagree. I think this man's a fine American who loves his country. I just disagree with him and wants the best way to lead the country. You know what I mean? I'm not going to take shots up here about saying this guy's evil who hates America, XYZ. And we need to be able to, I hate saying we when I talk about Democrats. The Democrats need to be able to show that they do care about the country. Because the thing is, people say this, and it is honestly quite a bit true. If you see an American flag outside somebody's house, 80% of the chance what their party is. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Like, for some reason, patriotism has been all but abandoned by the left because, like, well, you can't take pride in what this country's doing. I'm like, dude, I don't take pride in what the country's doing, but I take pride in the community. I mean,
yeah. That's really where it is. It's taking pride in you know that the United States has to some degree better than most countries has been able to learn from the level of mistakes that have happened in the past. And what I feel now is that there is some level of trying to push that back with what Trump has been doing with like the whole Smithsonian stuff, like all that stuff. I do not agree with because
yeah,
that's curtailing the magnitude of what actually happened in this country, which should be shined apart, which shouldn't be shut down, but should actually be more uplifted in the sense to like, okay, this is how bad it was, and this is where we are now. We're not
yeah.
proud of that, but we're understandable from that, and we can become greater from that as a people and as a community, as you're saying, because that's really the whole essence of what America is. We come together. We may be separate in hard times when laws have us separate, looking at each other differently, but when there's moving forward progress, it's all together all at once, and that's what kind of needs to happen nowadays with the level of political violence and all of the shootings at whether it's schools, the shooting that happened at the ICE facility, Charlie Kirk's assassination, all of those level of violence, bring us back to those times all the way back then when we were each fighting each other and couldn't have levels of conversation and dialogue that were civil.
And it's a problem when the president's a very large driving force behind it. Him, the VP, Cash Patel, even the director of the FBI. I mean, they've been quite literally spreading lies in order to incite political violence. And almost nobody is holding these people accountable. The Thomas Massey has held Trump accountable more for his words than the Democratic leadership. You know what I mean? Like, it's just it's disgusting. Why? Like, how come of all the people in the House, this one guy is the only one going against what the president is saying and considering saying, yeah, he needs to tone it down.
Yeah,
And I think that it's just a example of how people really don't. want to, the people in charge, the people in power, really don't actually want it to change, because the more extreme politics gets, the more guaranteed the votes they get are. And I think that right now we're seeing a big panic within the Democratic Party with that, because they were thinking for the longest time that they had a guaranteed group of voters every single election, the minorities, the minorities and some working class in blue states. And then we see that group, a lot of minorities, totally abandon the Democrats for the reason why the Democrats were doing nothing at
Yeah,
all
nothing at all.
about the ongoing political violence terminology coming from the president. They didn't say anything about it. They're just saying, "Oh, well, yeah, that's bad. We're not that bad. We're not." I'm like, dude,
Yeah,
I don't care if you're not that bad. Call it out for what it is. It's pathetic. It's evil. It's un-American. You know what I mean?
literally.
If the president's talking about how we need to expel certain congresswoman just because she's a Muslim, I'm like, dude, that goes quite literally against the American values of freedom of religion. You know, I always saw a few Democrats defend, Ilhan Omar after she was being, lambasted by Nancy Mace and by Donald Trump.
Yeah,
And so I'm like, if we can't even trust you guys to, defend, religious rights when the president himself is attacking people for it, why should we trust you guys about anything? If we can't trust you guys to make the right moral decision when it comes to Gaza, Palestine, why should we trust you guys about anything? And I mean, that's why the Democrats are so hated right now. You know what I mean? Like Schumer
yeah,
is so much of he's an embodiment of the problem. People hate us, but they hate President Trump more. Dude, you can't just stick to your old ways and be like, oh well, we're hated less. Haha. I'm like, dude, the reason why you're hated nearly as much as one of the most, probably the most, I was gonna say
yeah,
flamboyant, which I would call Trump the most flamboyant president ever, the most divisive president in modern history. You've got to give us more than "we're not that bad." Haha.
yeah.
My name is
Because
Chuck Schumer. I've been in this
yeah,
job for 30 years. I know what I'm talking about.
but I think he kind
And
of says that because like we're winning races, so that's kind of why I think he says that. But it's still like you're having like that Hillary Clinton moment. Like you're not self aware
not
basically.
self-aware at all.
And
Not self-aware at
that's
all.
the biggest issue a lot of Democrats have, and that's why Hillary Clinton lost, and that's why I really think that um, like Biden and Kamala, that whole transition failed so utterly. Both of them didn't have a self awareness to the level of dislike of regular voters, independents, as much as Democrats also disliked those two candidates as well as Hillary Clinton across the board. Like yes they turned out to vote for them in storms, but it wasn't a happy wishful vote that's happening.
At
Where
all.
comparison on the other side of the aisle, you have that happiness vote. Like yes, I do want to vote for Trump.
So
Like
enthusiastic.
yes, well, like me for like Hillary Clinton, I was I guess so. Like I
Yeah,
mean,
I felt
like
about
I didn't
Biden.
want
I don't want
Trump, so
to
I'm
do this
like, all
guy.
right, I think she may be a little bit better. Let's just see. Let's roll the dice. Let's just see what happens. And that's what it was for Biden and also, Kamala as well. And that level of enthusiasm is a lot of what Democrats are missing. And even, Gavin Newsom hit this nail on the head basically. The podcast that he had with an author from a book called Abundance, basically about the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and how they do different levels of messaging when they get stuff done, basically. So Republicans, they always touted on their chest, they got things done, and they will call out
Loud and
Democrats.
proud.
But Democrats, they don't do that. Like Biden did not run hard enough on his, infrastructure bill, on what were the things that he actually got done with it and so forth. Like those were the issues, and those were the top issues that Democrats could have spoke on to gain better ground. While the whole, social issues were starting to eat up at their feet and ankles, and eventually lose them almost a third of voters, and also the presidency and other seats as well. So it's like that level of self-awareness is key for Democrats to continue to understand and have that on their shoulder. Don't have a chip on your shoulder, have that self-awareness on your shoulder, because that's how you'll be able to truly connect and truly understand your place politically in the world, as well as where you sit in the hearts and minds of other voters that are in your party, outside of your party, and in the middle of your party.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, the Trump and the Republicans will say they did something even if they didn't do it.
Yeah,
The Democrats won't say they did something even if they did do it.
like I think Trump was starting to take credit for a lot of the constructions that started happening due to the infrastructure bill, because now it obviously when there's a new governor, like interstate signs, they changed, put the new governor's name on there. So like with federal buildings and things of that nature and construction, they had President Biden's name on there, but now it's President Trump's name. So now he's able to take credit for that when Biden fell flat and fell short and didn't really speak to those things. So it's
It,
kind of like, Democrats need to have small, medium, and big wins, but also need to be able to talk about those wins and effective messaging that lets voters know that these changes that you're seeing are because of good Democratic policy, or these things that you're seeing are from bad Republican policy.
And the thing is, the Democrats do need to have a change with with their messaging and what they believe. I mean, the big thing that we're really seeing this on is the whole Palestine Gaza situation. I mean,
Yeah,
it was in the recent polls that came out regarding Kamala and her campaign. It said the main reason, which I can attest to this based off anecdotal experience, the main reason why Democrats didn't vote for Kamala was because of Palestine. Not even because they were fed up with LGBTQ nonsense, not even because
yeah,
they thought she was poor for the economy. It was literally because this woman is gonna just keep condone it, keep going on with the genocide of the Palestinians. And I think this is just a perfect example of how the Democrats need to change their ideology and they need to change their messaging. Like, hey, yeah, that was the time of the old. The time of the old was the ones that were just coddling up to the rich, okay with the status quo, and while they just completely abandon you guys. We're not about that anymore. We want to see change, and this is what we believe we'll do. This is what we're going to do, and this is what it will do when we put it in place. And I just don't understand how you can be such a powerful organization, the Democrats and the DNC, and be so unaware and stupid when it comes to how to deliver a message. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
clearly, they could take a message out of the Trump playbook and just scream and lie all day, and it'll work out better than what they're doing right now, which is nothing.
Literally. And it's the messaging is the key part, and Trump has been great at messaging. He's been basically a messenger all of his life in that level of business that he's always been. And so that's why he was so effective at it. Where, Democrats are hiring some of the worst consultants, think tanks,
Mm-hmm.
to formulate these level of messages to try to bring in blue collar, men, younger generation men, and so forth. But what the one representative is doing with the Patriot Pack, Ryan, that's a great example of the messaging that you need to do. You need to
Yeah.
bring in, you need to put a different spin on patriotism that is not like, that doesn't take patriotism out of like the word and feeling of it. Like being a teacher is just as patriotic as being a welder or anything of that nature. Like you're still serving, it's just different levels, but it shouldn't be frowned upon just because one's in the classroom and one is doing, hard backbreaking labor in a sense, or carpenters um, to teachers as well. I'm just going to go there again. Like
Yeah.
those connections shouldn't be disparaging between the two, and it shouldn't be like, oh, you're a teacher, you're X, Y, and Z. We should be against each other. Like no, that's the level of patriotism that they show within their jobs. It's just across the board. Like there should be no like, yes, you're more patriotic than someone else. Everyone has their level and how they show their patriotism
Yeah.
realistically.
No, I agree. I mean, you don't have to be over the top wearing the United States
Yeah,
flag as a jacket, pants, and a shirt to show you're patriotic, but just, loving your community, doing what you can to,
yeah,
help yourself, help your family, help your neighbors. That is patriotism. You know what I mean? Because it's the
yeah,
people that are the country. I've had a few arguments with other people who are other Democrats about this because, I'm a very patriotic Democrat, and I've had a few people who I've had this discussion with to just say it doesn't make sense how you could be patriotic when you don't when you completely disagree with what the government does. I'm like, 'cause I don't think the government's the country. You know what I mean?
right,
Like
yeah,
when I think of Afghanistan, I don't think all the people are like the Taliban. When I think of,
exactly.
I was about to say when I think of Israel, I don't think everyone's like the IDF, but that's actually wrong. I do think based off surveys, most people are like the IDF. So, but when it
Yeah.
comes to Serbia, I don't think most people are like the Chetniks, the ultra nationalists. When it comes to Egypt, I don't think people are like, the radical. And when it comes to just in general, I don't think that the people are represented by the government. And I think if you base our own experience as American citizens and apply that to the world, you'll generally agree with that. Because most people in this country don't agree with what the government does. Most people in this country think the government's doing a bad job. Congress has below a 15% approval. You know what
Yeah,
I
it's not
mean?
going to get better. Not going to
It's
get
not
better
going
at
to
all.
get better. Like, clearly, people don't like Congress, but yet people love the country, and and that's because they love their neighbors. They love living here. Life in America, as much as we complain about how it could be better, because it can be and absolutely should be, because we deserve more because we're Americans, it's better than almost everywhere else in the world. Aside from some few Western European countries, we quite literally have a better standard of living than almost everywhere in the world. And the thing is, when
Yeah.
you live in the country that's been known to be the tech innovation, to be the one innovating and being at the forefront of change whenever change is occurring, you expect to be, and you're contributing to that. Since you're like, well, if this country's the best in the world, which I believe, I expect to be treated well by the country itself. You know what I mean? And there's that JFK quote that I like, that on the
Oh,
whole,
yeah.
that I think everybody likes. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. I agree with that sentiment. See what you can do for your country, but the chickens come home to roost. People are going to get to a point, and they are getting to a point where they're thinking, I'm not getting the fair treatment I deserve from
Yep.
these people.
Yeah. I mean, without a doubt. And I think what a real precipice of that is like, I think a lot of people are seeing this like Argentina lifeline and it's kind of like, we're seeing,
Ridiculous.
increasing prices, gas prices, car prices, and everything's rising. That's like, well, why are we able to give Argentina $20 million when Americans are
20
suffering? Like,
billion.
yeah, $20 billion, and why are we able to continue to finance Israel, their weapons, and all of that through taxpayer dollars? But yet Americans are continuing to suffer. But we can give lifelines
And,
to
and
foreign
take
countries.
in mind, when Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was asked about the possibility of bailing out New York City, he said, let them burn.
Yeah.
When
So
talking about
yeah,
Americans, he says, let them burn. But when he talks about Argentina, a country on the literal other side of the world, northern hemisphere, he says, oh, well, $20 billion is absolutely a possible idea. And the reasoning why is just pathetic. So there's two reasons why. With the other one we were talking about earlier on the prior episode, where Argentina is a staunch Israel supporter,
yeah.
and then since Milei got put in place, they've redacted their recognition of Palestine as a state. But two, also I found this out earlier. Argentina has a big loan from China. Whereas if they
Hmm.
were to default on it, they'd be much more affected and involved with the Chinese financial system.
Yeah.
So this 20 billion loan is meant to pay off that loan to China and then make sure Argentina doesn't rely on them financially in the future. And I just want to say this about this all, and what pisses me off the most about this. So, our farmers, most of our soybeans
Yeah.
and many, many other crops, our top importer of those is China.
China.
China in this year, again because of what Donald Trump has been doing, has completely cut off farm imports. So much
Yeah.
so, last year before Trump became president, around this time there was about 10 billion, I believe, in soybean exports. Around
Yeah.
there, it was in the
Yeah. Yeah.
billions.
You guys can go
And
back when we definitely reported on this in a few
yeah,
episodes ago. But
it was
yeah.
around
Mhm.
10 to 12
Yeah.
billion in this
Hmm.
time of the year, soybean exports. Now, this year, zero,
Zero.
zero. And this is the thing.
Zero.
This is the thing. So that what they were doing was Argentina was then buying the soybeans from us and selling them to China. So it
Yeah.
was like a loophole that we were taking an extra step around to help the farmers, because Trump loves to act like a tough guy and put the world's largest trading partner on a hotspot when we can't afford that for our farmers. And then what does China do? China tells Argentina, hey, if you sell us any more US soybeans, we're just going to completely cut trading with you. What does Argentina do? They stop selling the US soybeans. They just stopped it entirely. And now we're at this position where China doesn't want to do anything with us because of how much Trump is being for lack of a better word, a stubborn dickhead about this negotiation. He's delayed the China tariff for his entire presidency while threatening it. And I think it's because he knows that he's not going to force China to do anything. I think it's because he knows that the United States doesn't have the upper hand here. And I think it's because he knows that we
Yeah.
need China more than that they need us, because we see something like this. The soybean exports is a fantastic example. And then we have it here in the notes as well. We see now that they're talking about bailing out the farmers
Yes. Yeah.
because they're not making any money. They're saying, "Oh, we're going to take the tariff revenue and give it to the
Get it.
farmers."
Yep.
And I'm like, dude, if you just didn't get involved in the first place, I'm sorry, I shouldn't yell. I think sometimes it cuts above the audio and it makes it sound that bad. We shouldn't have gotten involved you shouldn't have gotten yourself involved in the first place by implementing these stupid tariffs that affected
Exactly.
these traders. Let the free market do itself. You know what I mean? These people will be able to live their lives and plan for it much easier. And then we got the federal government coming in saying, "Oh well, we need more trade laws. We need more
Yeah.
things to stay in between us and the other people for protection of the American consumer and the American manufacturer and more." And I'm like, dude, this is they're doing the exact opposite of what your intention is. And I do think I know these tariffs aren't a means for Trump to try to improve the lives of Americans. I know this is just him doing what he loves to do and seeming like he's the businessman who controls everything. And it is
Yeah.
really, really costing people a lot of money.
Like, yeah, he's definitely thinking that, he's the man and he's doing the right thing, making the right moves and so forth. And as we're talking about this, level of global news and global intervention that Trump's having, I do want to move on to hitting the global section. But first, I do want to just add in that this is a little separate, off topic. Looking at some military high oversight. I saw Hastings. I always forget how to pronounce his name. The Department of War Secretary, um,
Hesgeth?
Hesketh. Yeah, he called in a unprecedented amount of generals, basically to meet on Tuesday, and a lot of individuals in the Pentagon are thinking that we might be preparing for potential war. And
The
yeah,
peace
the
president.
Yep, and individuals, Pentagon, as I'm saying, are stating that they think that this high level meeting is geared towards some war preparements or capabilities coming from the United States. And then on top of that, you have Microsoft's action highlighting ethical tensions in United States tech role in foreign conflicts. The U.S. Israel is basically removing Israel. I'm sorry, Microsoft
Microsoft.
is removing Israel from from a piece of their software. They basically found that they were spying on thousands, basically all of the Palestinians that live in the Gaza Strip. So
I want to add, DropSite was the
yeah,
news site that broke this news in the first place. So any of our listeners, check out DropSite. They've got very good journalists who do very good work over there.
yeah. So this is like another level of you know derailment of approval of whatever Israel is continuing to do in the Gaza Strip. Like no matter what, it's almost like a daily notice that everyone gets in the news of like how bad actually Israel is, and how you should feel bad for the individuals in Gaza and should be for Palestinians, and whatever like Netanyahu is doing is completely wrong, and especially using taxpayer dollars. And as we see here, U.S. company tech to spy and use surveillance on individuals that he's continuously bombing and terrorizing.
Yeah, to
Those
commit war
they live,
crimes.
yeah, they're living in a constant state of terrorism by the Netanyahu regime, and then
The thing
continuing. Mhm.
I'll say the
Yeah.
thing it makes me very frustrated how the United States designates any group they disagree with as terrorists, while any group they get along with, even if they're committing terror politically, aka the definition of terrorism, they're not terrorists. Like by every means of the word, IDF is a militant terrorist force. By every means of the word, but they're not terrorists in the United States, but Hamas is, despite the fact that Hamas has killed a
Yeah.
fraction of the innocent civilians that Israel has, and has a fraction of the hostages. Israel has nearly 100 times more hostages than Hamas does. Nearly 100 times more. How often do you hear those stupid mouthpieces of the Israeli war machine say, release the hostages and then everything will be okay? The thing is, the United States has proposed multiple deals which have been accepted multiple
Yeah.
times. This has all been reported on. This isn't me just saying things out of thin air because I don't like Israel. This has been proven to happen that multiple times, at least 3 separate peace deals this year alone that were initiated by Trump's admin, that were agreed upon by Hamas, that Israel then moved the goalposts on and said it wasn't enough. And these peace deals all involved the release of all the Israeli hostages. And what it also involved was Hamas not being a governing body of Gaza, Gaza being able to hold its elections, and the Israeli military completely vacating out of Gaza. That's what the peace deals were. Basically, Hamas loses its power, all hostages are released, they hold elections so they can set themselves up. And Israel agrees to this, and then once it gets to a point where the hostages have to be released, they literally say, oh, well, Hamas has backfired on the terms, so we're not going to be following through on this deal. We're going to continue the military campaign. And it's just ridiculous how often we have to be. Oh, great. My cat just screwed up my camera. It's ridiculous how often we have to be on the other side of this where we're the ones funding it, where we're the
Yeah.
people on the funding the bill off this all. And not
Yeah.
only that, we see, according to Tucker Carlson, they Benjamin Netanyahu is going around Israel,
Yeah.
in his government, saying that he controls Donald Trump. As an American, as much as I don't like the president, I rarely ever do, honestly. I don't want to hear another world leader who is a war criminal talk about
Yeah.
how he controls my country, and he does. He
Yeah,
does.
he basically does. I mean, from what we've seen overtly from the Trump administration and how heavy-handed Israel has been and how accepting of that heavy hand the Trump administration has been, it's only fitting for Netanyahu to really go around and state that because, I mean, he can basically state, as Trump trying to be the toughest, president of them all, that, in back doors, like, yeah, I have this guy on the collar, basically. I think Netanyahu is visiting the United States again for our fourth time, like one of the most unprecedented. Um, the the amount of times that he has been to the United States is unprecedented, and within 9 months, 4 times coming to the United States. So like the evidence is there; it's almost blatantly there, and connecting the dots aren't hard to do on the level of connection and hold that Israel has on our government. And
It's
even looking at,
insane.
yeah, it's ridiculous. And even looking at moving towards Ukraine and Russia.
Wait. I want to say a
Yeah,
little bit more on this whole Israel situation before we go further. So, there, specifically speaking on the Microsoft Cloud situation.
yeah,
So that was reported on DropSite, and since then, Microsoft has reported that they've completely cut that connection off for Israel.
yeah,
But there's also been other reports of other American tech companies who are willingly going along with the Israeli war machine. One of them being Palantir. They at a press conference, this happened like 2-3 weeks ago. The CEO of Palantir was asked about what he thinks about Israeli deploying their AI systems to identify and track Palestinians through the Gaza Strip. And I believe it wasn't the weird one with the curly hair. It was Peter Thiel. Yeah. And Peter
mhm,
Thiel just gave like a non-answer, basically. Like he just didn't reply until security took the person out who was asking the question. So I think that considering that we're also seeing Palantir dig its claws into the vice president, who's basically been groomed by Peter Thiel and that group of people behind it, I do think it's an extreme concern that we should be asking and talking about of what happens just in the off chance that JD Vance does win. Because
yeah,
we're seeing the winds blowing against Israel on both the Democratic and Republican side, but we know how much the old boomers and the old Christians in the South, the dispensationalists, how much they love Israel for no good
yeah.
reason, mind you. And they
It'll
love
be Boomer
Israel.
and it'll be Marco Rubio and Vance, Palantir and
Yeah.
Israel.
No, don't even get me started on Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio and JD Vance, proud Catholics, but they'll completely, go along with the terrorist state that destroyed and killed innocent Catholics for no reason other than being there.
Yeah.
And I do think that these people are going to have a lot to reckon with once the judgment day comes. And I will be happy that I'm happy to think that everybody will have to deal with either the pain or the hope they brought into the world. And how this relates to Israel, I think that it's increasingly clear with the flotilla that's been being pushed. I'm not sure if you saw this, but there's the global Talmud. I'm blanking on what the name of the flotillas are specifically, but it's a global flotilla that was sent from people from around the world that was meant to break the siege on the Gaza Strip that Israel is holding, which is by the means an illegal siege, which is why people have been
Yeah.
trying to break it. Now, multiple flotillas have tried this in small numbers, and they generally just get seized. Everybody gets thrown into jail in Israel, then they get forcibly deported out of Israel. Now, what's significant about this flotilla is that it's hundreds of boats and hundreds of people. So it's like, what are they going to do? And one of the things Israel did actually was they bombed one of the flotillas with a suicide drone. And then after that happened, the Italians, this is God bless them, the Italians went on a massive 2-day, nearly countrywide strike where they were basically stopping the port, stopping the train, stopping everything that was a lot of the things that were going on in order to put pressure on the government to come out against Israel. Because Italy is one of the last few people that are somewhat supportive of Israel on the government level, which is funny to think about the Axis power supporting Israel. How times change, but the more times change, the more they stay similar. But to finish this all up, I wanted to just say that with that development of the flotilla getting bombed in the Italian protest, Italy has sent a navy ship in order to protect the flotilla in order to get to the siege point to Gaza Strip, which has never been done before. There's no one's ever been able to break the siege because Israel just either gets rid of them one way or another, or and two, Italy coming out in defense of these people with militant means is also a huge deal. And also because three, Spain then, which has been the most critical Israel country in Europe, really, has come out and also sent a Navy ship after Italy decided to do so in order to help the flotilla. So I do think that we're really seeing the pressure start to mount up against Israel. And I do think that it'll get to a point where even the United States and all of its shame with its politicians will not be able to save Israel from the impending diplomatic and possible militant might they're about to face.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna be a lot of military might, and with all of that military might, that also speaks to kind of like the Russia-Ukraine situation that's going on, and the levels of might that Russia has led on Ukraine, and the level of resistance that Ukraine has been able to give. But it's most more recently, I should say, Trump has flipped on Ukraine. So he's initially washing his hands on the war. So now Trump is saying Ukraine can regain all lost territory with NATO and EU support, urging them to down Russian jets. So earlier, before we actually got on, Russia has been stating that if there are any Russian jets shot down by NATO allies or NATO affiliated allies, it's basically going to start a war. Yeah. So his comments were kind of a pretense to say, yes, go ahead. Like if you want to shoot him down, go for it. And even if you watch the video, you can see Zelensky's face, and you can see him kind of like shoot up, like, oh, I can't believe he actually kind of said that in a sense, because now he as in Trump has no caring for Putin. Given that he states that their relationship meant nothing, and it's okay that it's
like a disappointed schoolgirl.
Yeah,
I thought I could trust Putin. It turns out he's not quite an honest guy. Turns out Putin says a lot of things, but he doesn't really mean them. That's not the kind of guy I like.
Who truly would have thought that?
Yeah, who would have thought that?
Yeah, the KGB,
the former KGB. Yeah,
exactly. And on top of the now heightened NATO concerns with downing Russian jets, and the washing the hands of the United States from the Ukraine war, which should have happened sooner than later. But you also now have Iran rebuilding their missile sites that were hit in June, signaling a level of defiance and obviously more potential escalation. Because don't get me wrong, you're going to have there are satellite images showing this. So from those images, I'm sure Israel will get their hands on it and will try to use it as another pretext to go after Iran once again, stating that they're getting closer and closer and closer and closer to a nuclear weapon, even though they just made the same deal with the same provisions that Obama did back in his first term, I believe. Well, in 2016, I believe that nuclear deal. So we'll see what continues to happen, and then more promises that Trump has made. He's assured Arab and Muslim leaders no, that Israel will not annex the West Bank, aiming to preserve the two-state hopes. But as we heard, Israel does not want that two-state solution to come to fruition at all.
Israel wants one state, and they
He
want that
wants
one
one
state to be
state and
Israel.
he wants greater Israel. He wants 50 states, one Israel. That's what, that whole summit was about. And that's what, him stating that, anyone that calls for a two-state solution or recognizes Palestine as countries have been, are basically not welcomed to Israel, will face flack from Israel, and Israelis will not be traveling to those countries. So it's just interesting to really see that, you know, Israel is becoming more and more and more and more and more and more unpopular daily, and having the president continually tying himself to Netanyahu is only making him more unpopular as well.
Yeah, and I think a big thing about this as well is that it's also Israel's increasingly isolating itself massively. So is America by defending Israel so vehemently. For those who don't know, Germany is responsible for 30% of the weapons sent to Israel, and America is responsible for the other 70%. Germany just voted internally to completely stop all weapon sales to Israel.
Yep.
Initially, this was just for weapons that were going to be used in the Gaza Strip, but after debating internally, the Germans decided to completely stop all weapons sent over to Israel. And this is an interesting thing to me because I was wondering where this was coming from, and from what I was reading, it was largely in a sense of the German parliament was understanding Israel was committing war crimes, and they thought it got to the point where if they would slash when they do get indicted and start to face the international justice behind it from the ICC, that Germany would also possibly be caught up in the criminal charges because they were abetting and aiding in the genocide through being one of the only two weapon partners of Israel. Now Israel is trying to get more weapons from India. They and but that doesn't come close to the Western weapons because India has had a lot of issues with jets and more.
Yeah.
So they're really going to heavily rely on the U.S. now, and we're really seeing with the U.S. that public push against that motivation. And I also think that with the direction things are going, it's possible that Putin may be trying to take advantage of this weakened Europe and weakened America situation because America is hurting itself by supporting Israel so much militantly.
Yeah.
AKA, after the Iranian strikes on Israel a few weeks ago, a month ago, America only had about 30% of its interceptor missiles in stockpile after that
Yeah.
because
Hmm.
so many of them, most of them went to Israel.
Stockpiles very
So if
plentifully.
our allies, our NATO, or if we were to fully commit to the Ukraine war, which based off of Trump's own words, it seems like the United States is ready to fully commit to it by saying, "Hey, even if it's an active war, shoot those planes down, shoot the
Yeah.
drones or jets down." I do think that Putin is calling a bluff on Trump's end. And I also think that even if Trump is bluffing, I think Putin knows that America is in a weakened state with less direction militaristically than it has been in the past. And we mentioned that Pete Hegseth calling all the generals and admirals in. I think that's for one of two things. I think that's for either A, this war with Russia that might happen, or for B, going seizing that air base in Afghanistan that Trump has
Yeah.
mentioned before,
Hmm.
so they can help Israel against the Middle Eastern Muslims.
Yeah.
I think if Trump, this is the thing, I think if Trump does follow up with the Afghanistan airbase, I think it's just going to show the Arabs that he's not at all to be trusted. I
No, not
think
at
that
all.
I think he's not capable of actually promising that Israel won't annex the West Bank. And I think, given the fact that Netanyahu has said he's going to annex the West Bank regardless, I think the Arabs are going to again see we cannot trust the Americans. We need to rely on
Yeah,
ourselves and
Qatar,
China.
Saudi Arabia would be up in arms.
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah,
oh
they would
yeah.
be up in arms. They would not allow that to happen. They would not allow that to happen without consequences
I think
to
that that'd be an act of war annexing
Israel.
the West
Oh yeah,
Bank.
without a doubt. Yes, 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 yes. It definitely would. And I think they would have every right to. Israel is manipulating the president for his own good, as we have seen, and Putin is now taking advantage of that, and continuously flying jets over NATO airspace, as he did with Poland and a few other additional countries. He's testing the waters to see who's going to be the first one to basically do it realistically. Because as Trump said, go ahead, shoot him down. And Russia has stated if one is shot down, that will initiate war. So these are the heightened levels that unfortunately the global sphere is currently at. And domestically, it's the picture is looking almost just as bad in a sense. It's not really war with other countries, but it's war with other political parties, which is something that as we've said on this podcast, needs to be derailed completely, and it just needs to be taken down across the board. And you don't have someone at the presidential and executive level able to say that. So it's individuals and channels like ours where hopefully they come and hear different perspectives, and also hear that those levels of violence, left side, right side, are just wrong across the board.
And also to add, I'm very anti-war, but I know
Yeah.
also that I like to think realistically, and I know governments love war. And so I just try to view it as, all right, well, if it's going to happen, what are the benefits and what are the cons? I honestly think that a war with NATO versus Russia would be a net positive to NATO for two reasons. I think that one, China is not going to help Russia in the war because then that China isolates China from much of the world. China's not stupid enough to do that. They love having that global connection to everybody.
You see, I'm personally waiting for the which I've talked about. I'm personally waiting for, which may I probably not have talked about it on this podcast. I
I
might
don't
have
know
in
if you
like
have.
the early stages, but China going for Taiwan. For me, that is
It could
the
happen.
biggest precipice. I think that is like the number one trigger right
The
there.
thing
Once
is,
that happens, I feel like it's just everything will just start going off.
I need to read up more about it, and I'll get back to the Russia stuff in a second and why I think it'll be a net positive for NATO and America. But from what I know about China and Taiwan, is that the Chinese view Taiwan as Chinese people, just like
Yeah,
a different government that's just Chinese
like
people.
Russia with Ukraine, basically.
Yeah, like Russia, how Russia views like Crimea and parts of Ukraine.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
they so I think that as long as man, it's hard to say. Honestly, as long as innocent people don't get killed, I wonder how much Taiwan would actually fight over it. But at the same time, I know Taiwan really values its sovereignty, and if they were to go under the Chinese umbrella, they lose that sovereignty. And at the same time, I know China is aware that Taiwanese State Manufacturing Company,
Yep.
in Taiwan itself, is responsible for a massive amount of semiconductors in the world. So they're not able to come in destroying things left and right like we're seeing with Israel and Gaza. But not even Russia and Ukraine really isn't that bad when it comes to the scale of death and destruction compared to Gaza and Palestine. So that's why I'm comparing it really to that. I It'd be interesting to see, but I do think that it's possible that China would make that move. But I don't know how much Trump is actually committed to caring about Taiwan. He hasn't mentioned it in a while.
Yeah, no, I just think just from like just the value of Taiwan, and
Oh
as you're
yeah.
saying, the chip manufacturing that is over there, that makes it such a focal piece for if China was to make a move on it. I feel like that's going to be the larger spark compared to if a NATO country shot down a Russian jet, in my opinion. I feel like that is going to be, but I also could also say that like once that happens, the Russian jet shot down, that could be China's move to actually go ahead, because now what are we going to do? Fight on
Fight on two
three,
sides.
no, three fronts?
Yeah,
three,
Israel,
four
Russia,
fronts now.
and
Yeah.
China. Yeah.
So we're going to be overspent, and then then you have BRICS come in, and then you just have a whole conglomerate of just incidents after incidents of incidents that would just lead to the greater war realistically,
And
and
the
that's what
thing
we
is,
don't want to see.
war is very profitable too for certain people. So it's entirely possible that the United States might go to war with Russia as a means to try to revitalize its economy in the sense of increasing manufacturing production of these military weapons and more. And that would be bought up by our European allies. Now, I've said this before and I'll say it again. I'm all for weakening Russia. I do think they're America's number one enemy. I don't trust Vladimir Putin, nor do I trust, the government of Russia whatsoever. They poisoned the top political and murdered the top political opponent, Navalny. So it's clearly a country that is against what American values are, freedom and democracy.
Yeah.
But I do think that why I said that I think that war with Russia would be a net positive is if NATO were to able to go further east. The reason why Russia started the invasion largely was because there was talks of Ukraine joining NATO. If this war happens, Ukraine is 100% joining NATO, and NATO and America will be able to extend their reach, their militant reach, further into the region.
Yeah.
And now I think that we're going to start seeing a lot of things change in recent years and in the upcoming years. I think that war. I'm fairly convinced that's what the call from Hesketh was about, and
Yeah.
what they're going to talk about this upcoming week is the idea of fully committing to helping Ukraine against Russia.
Hmm.
And it's just my gut feeling. I think it's a tiny chance it's about Afghanistan again. More likely, given the president's comments, it's about Ukraine.
Yeah,
And
Ukraine,
I
and just kind of like what to do in preparation if a Russian jet is shot down. Like, what are those levels of advancements that the United States is going to be able to do, and how fast are we going to be able to get troops out there to whichever country shot it down,
yeah.
or whichever country is going to have the Russian troops starting to invade on them. But as these all of these developments, well, all of these topics continue to develop, we will always continue to give our listeners, the most engaged, balanced, and informative perspectives that we have on this information, and also the facts as well. Um, Mohammed, do you have anything else?
Um, I really don't got anything else. It was a fun conversation as usual.
Yeah, fun conversation as usual. And also just want to make a highlight. We will be having another special guest episode tomorrow at 4 o'clock. This is going to be with Think Right PR. They are a conservative public relations firm. Basically, going to be talking about protesting, the levels of protesting, how is it funded, and things of that nature. It's going to be a great conversation. So definitely check out for our tweets about the episode, and we look forward to seeing everyone for that episode. And if it is not live recorded, we do hope everyone is able to listen to it once it is posted. And as always, we greatly
Wait, I just want
appreciate.
to add that
Yep.
video will be on YouTube for
Yes,
those
that
of
will be on
you.
YouTube.
We've
Yes.
got our YouTube channel in the description. So if you guys just want to click on that, go over to the YouTube channel, hit subscribe, turn on notifications. Video will be out by Saturday.
Yes, we're actually at 10 now. We're at 10.
We're growing.
We're moving up there. We're moving up there.
Yeah.
So, definitely keep subscribing, keep sharing. We always greatly appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow.
Take it easy, everyone. May peace